Just first start by telling us, what was the company that you had formed?
Sure. So I set up my own company in 2004, really to make the kind of artistic work I wanted to make. I was a dancer before that, and I used to sort of make my own solo and duet work. And you need to kind of become a little bit more established in order to get the funding.
Yes.
So I had that right up till 2017, and then I shifted it. I became a charity. So I voluntarily stepped down as a director. I had a board, I had an executive director, and it was called Rosie Kay Dance Company. So to all extents and purposes, it was my company, it had my name, and I was the sole artistic creator, and I was the person that brought all the income in as well.
And you were creating the shows and directing the shows and that kind of thing. What sort of shows were you doing?
So I made what I would have classed then as quite political work. So I made a trilogy of work that started with a piece about the body and war, then I looked at the body and religion, and then I looked at politics, which became all about conspiracy theory just around the time of the Trump election. I suppose like the piece about war, Five Soldiers, is such a seminal piece because I was really really taken with what was happening in the war, particularly in Iraq at that time. So we're going way back to 2007. And in order to understand how a soldier prepares for war, I joined an all-male infantry battalion, and I embedded with them, and I learned pre-deployment training techniques, and then I spent time at Headley Court, the sort of rehabilitation centre, and then also Selly Oak, the Royal Centre for Defence Medicine. So I kind of have these really thorough, long, in-depth research processes, and then I make works of art about it. And these are challenging, they're non-compromising, they're quite hard-hitting, but they're also like really human and with humour and like real physicality. So, I mean, in the dance world, I'm quite renowned for that work, for that research, for being somebody who speaks my mind, who tries to defend dance and dancers. That's the kind of work I was doing.
And clearly not shying away from difficult subjects. This is part of what you do.
It was actually even written into our charitable objects.
Yes.
So in it, there says something around the lines like and supporting the work of Rosie Kay to tackle controversial and taboo subject matters. So that was written into the purpose of the charity.
So given that that's your mandate, we do have to cover what actually happened to you that night and there was a party at your house.
That's right. So I was working with a cast of very young, quite inexperienced dancers over a period of like on and off for a year right through COVID. And it was appallingly difficult. Nobody could eat or socialise together. We could hardly touch each other. We're making a huge production of Romeo and Juliet. It's on the big scale. And I felt there was something funny in the vibe.
Yes.
I thought the atmosphere was odd, and I put it down to COVID. So I invited them to my house, my family home that I shared with my husband and my child. I cooked them every kind of type of lentil, pescatarian, gluten-free, vegan, you name it, lots of different
they're
foods.
Dancers,
they're
right?
Dancers, I totally get it. And said, kick back, relax, you're in my home, we're in the garden, there's less of a COVID risk, and relax and enjoy yourselves.
Yes.
And they did.
And people were drinking, presumably.
Yep.
And then you said a few comments that rubbed people up the wrong way, shall we say?
Well, what happened was I was asked what my next show was, and I was already about 2 years into research for a work based on Virginia Woolf's Orlando. And I don't know if you know the novel, but it's a fantastic, funny, really witty, clever novel that goes through 400 years of history, and the aristocratic, slightly wet hero, halfway through the novel, turns into a woman. Yeah. And so there's lots of Virginia Woolf's analysis of what makes this person who thinks they're a man or woman. And it's very well done and it's very clever. And I think it tells us something about this debate that's going on. And I'm interested in this debate because, my job is bodies.
Of course.
And my job is bodies. I deal with stereotypes. I deal with breaking stereotypes. And so I've been fascinated by this debate. Then when I said I was doing Orlando, I mean, we are talking like, nearly 2 a.m. when I'm talking about this. There was this thing that, that has to be played by a trans person. And I said, well, I don't know, it's just wide open right now. I was about to put an audition notice out.
Yes.
It could be a man, could be a woman, could be trans, could be... I don't know. It just has to be somebody extraordinary that can play this character. Yes. And that's then when the argument sort of started, because then it was like, well, how do you define trans? How do you define non-binary? And I was asked explicitly what my views were, and I gave them my views. And then I actually felt like I had to really defend why I think at its extremities this ideology can be really damaging for women's rights.
So you were asked your opinion?
I was asked my opinion.
About a controversial topic about which you are making a show?
Exactly, about which...
In your own home?
And I have researched for years, and I have training as an anthropologist at the University of Oxford. You know, I'm not coming into this like completely blind. I'm really thinking about all the implications and all the historical implications. I'd even just made a solo about my own life. And so I was wanting to talk about what it is to be a woman and to have a woman's body rather than to be somebody who thinks they're a woman without a woman's body.
And so what is it that particularly upset your guests that day?
Well, I think I hadn't quite realised that a lot of this is coming through the conservatoires, the universities, through the training. And so there's almost just like this palpable sort of shock. How dare you even say this? So it was just one of these situations where the more I tried to explain and defend myself, the sort of worse it got.
Yes.
I think also I wasn't quite ready for those sort of arguments. I wanted to put it in my work and I wanted to talk about it. I was working with an LGBT book club. I was working with some trans friends of mine. I was preparing myself for this argument. I wasn't expecting to go bam into it at 2 a.m.
But I think that's because the kind of culture you're describing that has sort of grown up within the educational establishments is there's a fixed view that you can have, and deviating from that view or even discussing that view can be perceived as problematic.
That's right. I think even within one of the complaints, it's that Rosie says she wanted to have a debate.
And that
in itself is a complaint that I said, no, but I want to debate this. I want to be able to talk about this.
I think because debate is seen by activists as a tool of the privileged to uphold their privilege. That's the way they frame it. What were they went away and complained. Who did they complain to?
Well, I think this was it. This is the problem. And now at the time, of course, it was very shocking and quite scary for me. But now I realise that there's a sort of playbook here that plays out. I had a board. I expected them to sort of support and, at least see two sides, at least see that there could be two sides and just not take it on face value, look a little bit deeper, have some trust in me. Instead, I think they went straight into like sort of full complaints and encouraged the dancers to complain, quite seriously encouraged them.
But did it not make a difference that this was your company? It had your name in the title.
So in the first investigation, I really went with it and I was exonerated. But then one of the non-binary dancers appealed, despite there not really being a process to appeal or nothing to appeal for, because they'd walked out. And so when the second investigation began, that's exactly was my point. I started to say, this actually is now getting existential. If I can't say and think freely, I cannot do my job. And I then discovered through freedom of access subject data request stuff, I discovered that the executive director and the chair were discussing how to re-educate me.
I mean, that's such a chilling phrase, isn't it?
It's so chilling. And in a moment of lucidity, one of them says, yes, but of course, Rosie's probably better read about this subject than any trainer. But, however, we have indications that she might want to look at these sorts of issues in her future work.
That's absolutely incredible.
So it really was. I knew it at the time, but now I can prove that. It was existential for me.
Yes.
I had no trust in my board. I had no trust in my management. They cancelled Orlando without my permission. I resigned citing constructive dismissal because they did not uphold their side of the contract.
And where next, then? Is that why you decided to form a new company?
Well, I took a little bit of a breather. I just kind of calmed down over Christmas. It's really harrowing when this stuff happens to you. And then what happened really took me by surprise. I just had this explosion of creativity. I had all these shows that I'd been wanting to make, but had already, I think, started to self-censor. You were talking about this earlier. I'd already started to go, that's too dangerous, that's too dangerous, that's too dangerous. And I just thought, well, I'm free. I'm back free again. So I put together a trilogy of new works. I put together the budgets and I just started back where I always began, writing funding applications and, putting that together, visiting theatres, talking to people, having these sort of conversations.
Because this is the point, isn't it? As a creative, as an artist, your freedom, artistic freedom has to be at the core of this, doesn't it? If you're curtailed in any way, how can you possibly flourish?
I think Virginia Woolf puts it absolutely beautifully. I mean, along with having a room of your own, you need to practice the art of freedom. And so since I was really, a professional dancer, since the sort of 90s, I've been really trying to train myself to be free I still get scared, going into an infantry battalion. It's terrifying. Looking at conspiracy theory, being told you're bonkers, it's scary. This is another scary incident in my life, but I'd rather be free and make the art I want to make than be curtailed. Otherwise, I should just go and make panto, really.
Right.
Well, nothing wrong with panto.
Nothing wrong with panto. But it does have a very formulaic quality.
It's different than making art, and I want to make art, serious art about the times we're living in, and these are serious times.
So what do we do as an artistic community? Artists are meant to be the most free of thinkers, the most cognitively liberated people, and yet they are expected to indulge in groupthink. What does that do to an artistic culture, do you think?
Well, I think there's lots of things that are kind of like pushing artists sort of down and in and around. Part of it is the funding system. Part of it is the really huge administrative systems, the curatorial systems, the programming systems. There's huge swathes of people that make decisions that take up money, and we get a little bit at the bottom if we're lucky. So there's already been a culture of, corporate speak, marketing speak, all these kind of things that have made you curtail yourself. And now I think there really is a fear that just one step wrong and you might get the wrath of the mob kind of coming down on you.
Well, also just being commissioned in the first place, because so many of the commissioning processes now seem to be, are you satisfying the message of social justice activism? Are you sending out the positive, representation, that kind of thing? But that does, and nothing wrong with that, but it does curtail it if everyone has to do the same thing.
Well, that's right. And I think I studied sort of the history of Weimar Republic and Nazi Germany, and looking particularly first at artists and then at choreographers. And we really need to stand up and defend not just freedom of expression, but it is freedom of thought and it is freedom of speech. And these things are vital for a free society. I work with military and I work with people that have worked in secret services. Artists being curtailed or censored or shut down, it's one of the first signs that a society isn't very well. It's one of the first signs that authoritarianism is coming in. And so we really are the canaries in the coal mine. And it's up to us collectively to say, no, this isn't acceptable. We need to make the art about now.
Is it the case, though? I think a lot of people are confused because they'll say, well, no one in the state is censoring artists. No, there are no bodies censoring artists. But from what you've described, we are creating a climate in which self-censorship is the norm.
I think what we're used to in history, whether it be through the Soviet era or the Nazi era, is it's been top-down.
Yeah.
What's very different about this movement that's going on, whatever you want to call it, wokeism or whatever ideology, is it seems to be a little bit bottom-up. Now, I'm not sure how true that is. It's very hard to trace, but it seems to be coming up through, and then it seems to be across so many institutions, and that's created a climate of fear, without doubt.
So what do you say to people who say, well, cancel culture is just a right-wing myth, it doesn't exist?
Well, I'd say I lost my livelihood, I lost my life's work, and my reputation was put on the line. That I didn't imagine that actually happened to me. But what I don't want to do is just be a victim about this. I kind of want to sort of say to people, actually, we all need to just speak out the little bit that we can. We don't need to go to the extremes, but we can all work together to say, no, this is not acceptable. This isn't the Britain that I'm used to, and this isn't the kind of way that I grew up with the arts. It's a fantastic place, the arts, and we really should be free. And
do you feel that if enough people speak out about it, because it is risky to, let's face it, you were put in a position where, in a sense, you had nowhere else to go. But even the fact that you're sitting here now talking to me is a courageous thing to do, because most people wouldn't do that, even.
And the problem, and why I'm here, is because I now know so many artists, choreographers, across all sorts of disciplines that are getting in touch with me and are telling me similar stories. Yeah. And lots of people aren't able to speak out, can't speak out, or haven't been able to. So that's why I want to be a figurehead. I mean, it's not just me. There's lots of artists.
I do wonder, when people say it's just a myth, I keep thinking, well, why do all these people keep contacting me? I have playwright friends, writers contacting me saying, I wish I could talk about this, but I can't risk it. They're not all hoaxing, are they?
No,
it's a real feeling.
No, they're not. It's a real thing, and I think it's reaching quite a sort of boiling point now. Yeah.
So what next for you? Just we haven't got much time, so just if you could tell us about your new company, what you're going to do, how people can find out more about it.
So I've got a new company. It's called K2 Co, and it's K-. 2co.com. And I've got a fantastic new advisory board with some amazing people. We're going to launch a new tour of Five Soldiers in the autumn that's touring all around the country with an engagement programme. And then I'll be doing my trilogy of new work, which also includes training for professional dancers as well as engagement work.